in a letter that's been making its way around the internet, excerpts of which we shared in our reading this morning. Unitarian Universalist Kenny Wiley recounts how our religion has a history of taking extraordinary actions in the fight for racial justice. Many Unitarians and Universalists were on the front lines of the abolitionist movement, sometimes getting arrested, having their property destroyed, their presses burned down, or even their lives threatened in the process. We were there at Selma when the call went out from Dr. King, and it was there that a young Unitarian minister, the Reverend James Reed, was killed in the streets by racist thugs. Shortly after, another Unitarian woman named Viola Liusa was shot and killed by Klansmen while shuttling black protesters back and forth to rallies. The poet Adrian Rich wrote, "I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." In the history of our country's fight for racial justice, many ordinary people, people with no extraordinary power, performed extraordinary acts for the sake of justice. And some of them paid an extraordinary price. They were moved to do so by the values that have always been central to our religion, and indeed many religions: a belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, a belief in freedom for all people, and a belief that love means fighting for justice. They had no extraordinary powers, but they were buoyed up by their commitment to extraordinary ideals. Now, what Kenny Wiley in his letter is asking of his fellow Unitarian Universalists does not require extraordinary power. It requires ordinary courage of a kind available to each of us. Black people need you to show up, Wiley says. They do not need you to lead. They do not need you to take over. But they do need you to show up. And showing up requires the courage to stand out from the crowd a little bit. The courage to have conversations that may be uncomfortable. The courage to show up in unfamiliar situations surrounded by unfamiliar people. And it requires the courage to face truths about our country's racist past and its racist present, and sometimes to speak those truths to people who don't want to hear them and who will be angry at you for saying them. So these things will sometimes ask us to stretch outside our comfort zone, maybe way outside our comfort zone at times. But we all have the courage necessary to do them. What is needed now is resolve. Resolve and a kind of holy impatience. In the early days of the civil rights movement, moderate liberals were always telling Martin Luther King Jr., just be patient. Why do you have to push so hard? Just be a little more patient. And so from the confines of the Birmingham jail, he wrote, "Why we can't wait." Now is the accepted time, said W.E.B. Du Bois. Not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. Now is the time to show up. Now, the wonderful thing about living in a religious community is that we don't have to do this alone. This community can help us find ways to show up, and then when we do, we can show up together. Since August, UUI has been working with the organization IndyCAN, the Indianapolis Congregational Action Network. They identify ways that congregations can show up and fight for the issues that further the work of justice. Issues that make a real, practical difference in people's lives. And so today I have the great pleasure of welcoming to our pulpit the Reverend Juard Barns, who is going to speak more about IndyCAN and the work that they do. So, you're welcome.
How you doing? Okay, now, I might ask you how you doing or something, or whatever, talk back to me. I'm a 56-year-old Pentecostal preacher, so there's that. What I'd like to do is be very open, first of all, about who I am. born in Elkhart, Indiana. So when I say my family was part of the second black family to ever come to Elkhart. And I'm proud to say that there have been 3 black men in the NFL from Elkhart, and all 3 of them are in my family. My father's youngest brother, his son, and my cousin. There have been, but my father came from a family, the Barnes family, that were these huge men. My father was 6'4", 285 pounds. He had a 9th grade education, but he was one of the smartest men I've ever met. He had this ability to where he worked all day. He was a garbage man by day. He had a little Sanford and Son business in the backyard at night. His uncles and I, his brothers and him, who were my uncles, plastered. They had a plastering business. And they don't do much plastering now, but for those who remember what plastering was, it was a big deal. And he was a minister. So he did all of these things. And so he was in the house with me and my brother and my 2 sisters. But we rarely ever saw him because basically he was underemployed and he worked all the time. That's really what it boiled down to. And so when he left his garbage man job, he would go and do his plastering. And he bought old buildings and he tinkered on those buildings and he rented them out to people. And he did all he could do to make a living for us. But at 53 years old, he was too sick to work. At 58, he was dead. Congestive heart failure, diabetes. He weighed 160 pounds when he died, from 285. I watched this man, this hulking man, this man who loved people and who people loved, and everybody called him in the neighborhood preaching. And I watched this man who, we were sort of ghetto fabulous in that we lived in the hood, but we had stuff because he worked all the time. So the kids would come to our house, and I didn't understand it then because I didn't know what it took to eat, but they would always come to our house and eat. Because I didn't realize then that people in this country were hungry. People right here in America were not eating. And so my friends would come to our house, and my mother and my father somehow knew that. Because my mother always cooked a lot of food every day. Sometimes it'd be beans, cornbread. Sometimes it'd be pork chops. Be all types of stuff, but always enough for people to come and get something and take something home because somehow they understood their responsibility. Now, my father had worked himself into this city, into such a place, whereas even though he was a black man with a 9th grade education, he worked himself into a position in the city by having so much integrity and so much confidence in who he was, and understanding how to build power, and we'll talk about that in a minute, until the mayor would not even fire someone who worked for the city without first coming to my father's house and knocking on the door and asking him, "Preacher, is it okay if I fire him?" This 9th grade education man. The powerful part about that was that the thing about, when I think about then what is power, somehow he had been able to get people in a room to talk and to develop ideas. And so I said, power then is organized people, organized money, and organized ideas. And that's the purpose of IndyCAN. To organize people, organize ideas, and ultimately organize monies. And so it comes from people who can see themselves, no matter what their background, no matter what they didn't have or what they didn't do, to have someone who can be a glue that can take context, which is whatever my situation is, work with the contrast, which is what has made my situation horribly different from what I thought it could be, and then bring change. What is my piece in the transformation of this situation? This is IndyCAN's job. IndyCAN is an organization that started in this city a couple of years ago, but it's part of a bigger movement, the Peak of National Network, about 42 years old, and this movement was designed to give people who did not have a voice, but very much more to the point. It's really a racialized conversation about how do we integrate certain people that are not in the situation, not in the conversation properly, into the conversation. And to have what is for some people a very uncomfortable conversation about what some people want to use the word hegonomics, which is an ideal that says that we have in some people's mind a huge conversation in unfortunately very elite areas, corners of our country, that says that we live in a post-racialized America. Every time I hear this, I squirm in my seat. When I look at a black man who has a college education and has gone to school for 4 years in his lifetime can expect to make the same amount of money as a white man with just a high school diploma. We do not live in a post-racialized America, but there is such a thing as an implicit bias that will not say what it believes, but will act out what it believes every day. And this is what has come in a PC America that has said, I won't say it, but I'll show you who I think you are. IndyCAN's job is to work, is our job, is to come to the aid of not just certain people, but to a universal community that even though some of us do not understand it, has the responsibility, as it were, to grind ourselves, I would say, together in a way that transforms a world. Transformation is a huge word because transformation can look so much like coercion sometimes. But the difference between transformation and coercion is when I'm being transformed, I do have the right to say no. Because if I can't give you a no, then what good is my yes? Sometimes we're in the room with people who don't see the world the way we see the world. Sometimes we're in the room who don't look at the world the way we look at the world. Our job is to be a picture of what transformation looks like. And what happens is, if I only try to make you do something by what I say, that's just a transaction, and transactions don't work well, do they? I'm going to give you an idea, and this is something that I work with. I do a lot of work, and some of you all may, someone told me when I walked in the door, they said, I looked on the internet and I saw who you were, and I don't know what the internet says about me, but trust me, it's not nearly as bad as I really am. I've done a lot of things in my life, and some of those things I did in jailhouses. And as a man who stands before you as a man who went to Indiana University, who went to Morehouse, and who went to jail and has a felony, and who has 2 sons, 2 black men that I raised that I'm proud of, and 3 grandchildren, one of which speaks perfect Spanish and perfect English, perfectly bilingual. I have this United Nations thing going on in my family. And what I have found over the years is that my responsibility has come to the point where if I can't stand up for the realities, not just of the rights of people, but for the dignity of their right to exist, not just to be here, but to exist in a way that makes them that they can be part of transformation, and not just somebody that we're going to take care of those people over there. I thank God for the church world. I was raised in the church world. But did you ever notice something about the church world? That sometimes the church world gives us a place to hide behind God. Sometimes it gives us a place where we can hide behind saying, I must do the right thing because I go to church every Sunday. I must be okay because, after all, I go to church. But have you ever wondered why there's a whole generation that won't follow us to church? Because maybe there's something they've seen in us that they don't trust. Maybe there's something they've seen in us that they don't recognize. Maybe there's something they've seen in us that they can't grab onto. IndyCAN's job in this city is to do this. We have decided, and it wasn't us, it was a group of congregations in the city that decided we want to be a unified front. We want to be transformation, because without a unified front, there's nothing. And so these people decided that we can do great work in this city if we can make sure that we can overcome all of our boundaries and find out what it is that we actually have in common. Now, we know that that's a very simple thing to say, but sometimes a harder thing to do, because the things that we don't share in common tend to override the stuff that we have in common. I want to remind you of what I believe instead of reminding you of who I am. And that gets in the way of us having real relationship. And so, as I walk through this idea of an organization like IndyCAN that says, okay, we want the Unitarians and the Catholics, can you imagine that? And we want, can you imagine that? And the Baptists and the Central Christian and all these groups together, and they have something in common, that they believe in the dignity of human beings. That's the one thing. There may be other things, but that's the one thing that we know that we share. So the other stuff makes us angry, and sometimes we want to go in the rooms and just let's do that every now and then. Hey, sometimes I like to go in the room with my Catholic brothers and just take off the gloves and just fight. That's okay. But there are other times when I want to say, what can we do to change the world? Well, IndyCAN gives us that thread to do that. And so what IndyCAN has done the past 9 weeks is we went together, we sat down, and there was some definition given to what does it mean? What would it mean to bring a racialized conversation to take care of immigrants? Right now, they're building a $500 million criminal justice center in this city. They're not building it, they proposed to build it. And they proposed to build a $500 million criminal justice center in this city, and it's going to be right downtown. And when they did this, they now have 2,200 beds in the city of Indianapolis. They want to add 1,500 beds to the city of Indianapolis to that criminal justice center. Now, I don't know if you understand this, but in New York, they've already lowered the amount of time they give people to put in prison, and the amount of people that are in prison has dropped dramatically. Indiana is the only state that has risen, that has upgraded the amount of time they give people in prison, and the more they do that, the more people that keep going to prison. There is no correlation. There are no numbers now that will, well, there are some numbers, but the majority of numbers that will show you, will prove to you that if you can somehow create opportunities for people, they will not go to jail. You don't believe that? Okay, I believe I just said that. Let me say something. My phone, my trusty iPhone. There's some information that's out there, and there are people that have discussed certain issues in America, and before I go there, I want to finish this thread. The 1,500 beds are going to be used for federal prisoners and ICE detainees, for the immigrants that are coming. Right now in Indianapolis, there are 700 sheriffs in the United States who have decided they will not hold ICE, they will not hold people for immigration to come and get them. Indianapolis refuses to join that number. So if you ever see an immigrant get pulled over on the side of the road and he doesn't have his license, he's probably never going home again. He will not see his children again, and he's leaving this country. They will take him from here, they'll hold him, and they want to have more beds in our city so they can hold more ICE detainees. So they can take them to Chicago, then take them to Milwaukee, then fly them away. And their children will never see them again. This is the nature. Somebody might say that's okay, but that's not okay. They also want to say that somehow there's an issue, and we're not fighting a mayor or not fighting a mayor. That's really beside the point. This is not about people. This is about issues. And so the whole issue is what happens when young black boys don't have the understanding of what it means to walk like a man. I need to come out of this pulpit for a minute. I'm almost done. I can't stand up there, man. I'm going crazy. So as we begin to move in this thing, we got to understand there are some people who have been socialized in such a way where they have no idea what it means to do the things that you call that are right things to do. And sometimes it seems so crazy until what we have to do, we have decided that we went before the city council and we said, what can we do to make sure we may need a new jail? Who knows? We got to have a jail. Somebody's going to jail. That's not really the issue. The issue is, do we need 1,500 new beds? And what can we do to make us not need the 1,500 new beds? Well, the conversation is not as complicated as you may think. Indianapolis has 3 judges right now in the city of Indianapolis who are designated as work court. These work court judges have transitional jobs available to them. Right now in Indianapolis, there's one major transitional jobs company. It's called Recycle Force.
They now have the capacity to employ about 85 people. Work Court sends out about 50 people a year. The problem is it's over 5,000 people a year that come back to this city from the criminal justice system. So we got 50 jobs for 5,000 people. But one thing they should add to every newspaper clip, whenever they say First Source Bank got robbed, they should always say First Source Bank got robbed by an unemployed individual. Because if you're working, you probably don't rob banks. I wish somebody would say amen. Amen. Turns out to talk to me. About to get an angry black man up in here. Okay, so let's get an attitude, Dave. Okay, so as we move forward this whole, come on. So as we move forward this whole thing, the understanding is then that if you get 50 jobs for 5,000 people, are you serious about changing the lives of those people? No. There you go. And so the whole point is, once we get serious about it, then we put our money where our mouths is. If we put $500 million into a criminal justice center, maybe we could put $300 million into a smaller justice center with 1,500 less beds and create 5,000 jobs. Somebody says, how can that be done? I'm glad you asked. We presented across this country, in this nation, there's a concept called CBA. It's known as a Community Benefits Agreement. It's never happened in Indianapolis. It's never happened in Indiana. What it means is basically that you could not go to the city government or to the mayor and say, if you build that $500 million facility, you got to give us some money back. You can't do that. Because anytime a city makes a contract, they make a contract with the contractor. But when you have a central organization that can unify a large group of people, i.e. a group such as IndyCAN that can put all the UUs together, all the Catholic Church together, all the CBOs together, all the community organizations that want to work and build, and now you become one group. Now when the city makes a contract, they make the contract with the contractor and that organization. Which means that organization can demand certain things be in the contract. So a CBA means that we have enough power, and power is what? Organized people, organized money, and organized ideas, right? So when you build enough power, and power means that when you got enough people, let me tell you what that really means. That means that our mayor won by 7,000 votes last time, right? So if we had 7,001 votes, then the mayor would get all of his values and do exactly what you say. Whatever he woke up thinking this morning is really irrelevant. He'll do what keeps his job. If you can move 1% of the population, any politician in America will listen to you. If you move 2% of the population, any politician will meet with you. If you move 5% of the population, any politician will do exactly what you say. Because it had nothing to do with values, it's all about my job. You think I'm wrong? Just keep all the newspaper clippings from year after year from each politician that you know and watch how the narrative changes. So then what's ideal then is what does power make ideal for me? That's what ideals are. So you have the power to actually be an idealist for other politicians. So as a result of that, a CBA then becomes a thing that says if you spend $500 million, you got to give us some percentage of the profit back, which in this case could be somewhere around $20–25 million. Which means that instead of you having to spend more money of your tax money to have transitional jobs, apprenticeships programs, reentry programs, money to take care of these children that you're training in your church, because we got to start here, right? Right? We got to start here. And money to do that, you wouldn't have to go beg anybody. That money would be in a pot that you became a part of because you created the CBA. And guess what? We took that to Bob Bosley and the city council. You know what they told us? We built enough people because we already talked to, because of you, we've already talked to over 5,000 people. That's 2,000 away from what we need. And so the city council said, you know what? You guys now have the power, if you want to stop this thing if you wanted to. That's powerful. or you can demand what you want to happen. I don't know about you, but personally, it's not my decision. Personally, I'd rather just let them do it and get what we want. Because I need people working. Because I feel good when my neighbor's working, because then he's not coming into my house, right? I mean, that's our reality. Now, this thing is really simple. And so we have these phone banks going on for the last 8 weeks. We've run 15 phone banks a week for the last 9 weeks. We've called over 5,000 people. And now we're into what we're going to call the Get Out the Vote Redemption Weekend, which started yesterday. We're in 4 locations. And in those locations, we have people calling like crazy. We called yesterday. We're going to be calling today at 2 o'clock. We're going to be at Eastern Star. We're going to be at Central Christian. We're going to be at, I think we're going to be at St. Monica's. And then tomorrow we're going to be at Central Christian. The UUIs are coming tomorrow with, I don't know, like 500 UUIs going to be in there tomorrow. And we're going to call on these people. And say it again, amen. And we're going to take this to the best of them, because once we go to the mayor or to the city council and say, look, we have the power to make you do what we want you to do, guess what's going to happen? They're going to stop. They're going to change the narrative next year, because right now the narrative is going to be next year. It's going to be, we got to have law and order. We got to have law and order. And everybody's going to say, yeah, woo, woo, we got. But what we really need is jobs, not jails. Because, see, law and order says that I got to know how to not trust that little dude over there, because I know he's... And law and order, conversation about law and order is going to give us some more Trayvon Martins. But if we have if we have a conversation about jobs, not jails, we're going to get transformed people. Now you got people who, I'm going to tell you about me. There was a time when I lived on just for a short period of time. I don't know how many of you know about Chicago. I lived on the elevated train, the L in Chicago. I rode from 95th Street to Howard. And every night, and people would ride past me who knew me and would not stop to pick me up, because they did not want to see me, because they said, I'm not picking that dude up. He's living on the streets. He's not worth picking up. Because I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to go. I had no one who cared. I had family over in Elkhart. They didn't know that I was living on the streets. But what transformed is when I began to see my own worth through people who cared about me, who said, I know you can. That's why it's called IndyCAN. I know you can. IndyCAN. You get it? So it's no that. So as you move forward in that kind of mentality, when somebody said, I knew you can, I began to look at myself and see, I'm not this guy who lives in the streets, but I'm a man with self-worth and dignity. And I began to reflect what I was able to see that other people said about me. And now people who did not want to be with me want to be just like me. That's our vision. My 20 minutes is just about up. I think I'm going to sit down now so I can come back. Okay, so you understand? So tonight, tomorrow, the UUIs, All Souls, we're going to be at Central Christian tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And we're going to make calls. And we're going to call registered voters in this city. And all we're going to do is make sure that 60% of people do not know there is a midterm election. 60%. So you're calling people to remind them to get out Tuesday and to tell them that, hey, do you have a plan? Because if you don't have a plan, it's not going to happen. I went to vote yesterday. That's a big deal for me, because you don't know how many times I missed voting in my life. That's a blessing for me. 88% of people who vote in Indianapolis are white people. 88% of people who vote we got to get some other folks voting. We have the power and the opportunity to do that tomorrow night at Central Christian. You get there at 6 o'clock, you make calls, Dave Jacqueline, we're going to feed you, I promise. They're going to have food, they're going to work it out, and I promise you, and if you come, you have a great time. Invest your time and your energy into this next generation, and we will transform this city. Amen? Amen. Okay, I like that. Give God a hand. Okay, here we go.